A few weeks ago, Miley, the kids, and I went over to Reverend Tim Vance's house, our friend from First Presbyterian Church in Santa Monica. You see, he told us he had one of those at-home pizza ovens, and he became quite adept at making pizza dough and pizza. We had to try it out. He invited us over, and let me tell you, when you see him in our sukkah, when we invite his church over this Sukkot, you might want to try and get yourself an invite because he is quite good at making pizza. But alas, this is not a sermon about pizza. Maybe next year. While we were eating, his older son and his wife, Maya, were talking about directions to get somewhere. Maya told him to MapQuest it. He looked at her totally confused. You want me to what it? For those of us that navigated before smartphones and Google Maps and Waze, MapQuest was revolutionary. It was the kind of internet innovation that made life seem easier, that made the quick technological advances that were happening seem totally harmless. I'm not exactly a digital native like kids today, but pretty close. My primary screen time growing up was an old tube TV and lots of Disney VHS tapes that my sister and I would watch over and over and over again. We had one of those speed rewinders because the VCR rewinder was too slow, obviously, when we wanted to watch Beauty and the Beast for the 500th time. When I think of the internet growing up, I think about the sound of dial-up. Beep, boop, beep, boop. You know the sound? Some of you do. I think of AOL. You've got mail. I think of Instant Messenger and the many hours it took to download a single MP3 on Napster or LimeWire, alongside a few unintended viruses, of course. What we now call social media took the form of Friendster and MySpace, and my favorite all-time social media company that I hope comes back, Juicer. Eventually, Facebook entered my life, then Twitter, Instagram. The internet slowly morphed from the innocent playground of my youth into something much more complicated. In addition to connecting us, it began to divide us. In addition to giving us access to an unprecedented amount of information, it began to be used to manipulate that information to confirm our biases and plant seeds of untruth. In addition to productivity tools and new channels of entertainment, it began to steal our focus and take over our lives. One of the most prescient movies of the past few decades was 2008's WALL-E, the love story of two cute little robots. It came to us just a year after the iPhone debuted and projected human life in the year 2805. For a little context, in 2008, Facebook was 4 years old. Twitter was 2 years old. Instagram and TikTok did not exist. The world that Pixar Studios birthed WALL-E in was a very different place than the world we live in today. The disconnect between then and now was driven home in one of the opening scenes of WALL-E, where the little robot watches Hello Dolly on an iPod video. I giggled at the animators who were creating a hellscape of Earth in the year 2805 thought iPods would still be around. Instead, 15 years later, kids don't even know what iPods are, and smartphones have taken over our lives. If you haven't seen WALL-E, the premise is that humanity was evacuated to space after Earth became uninhabitable. The plan was to leave trash-compacting robots, like WALL-E, to clean up the planet for humans to return in 5 years. But 700 years later, the plan has failed and humanity still lives in space. When I first watched WALL-E, I was not tuned into the social commentary throughout the film at all. But on a recent rewatch, I was astounded by how much the film felt like a sharp critique of where we've landed just 15 years later. Film critic Alyssa Wilkinson writes that the film paints a pretty stunning picture of the deleterious effects of letting two things continue unchecked: a society's insatiable need to consume cheap products, entertainment, food, resources, and private industries drive for profit when it overtakes public good. When we first see the humans aboard the Axiom ship, it's called, we see two people floating in chairs gliding through the ship, staring at screens right in front of their faces. And even though they're floating right next to each other, they're conversing through the screens in front of them. They can barely stand or walk or sit up. They are just blobs staring at screens all day, every day. This extreme representation of human life in a dystopian future seems a little on the nose, honestly. In many ways, the exaggerated depiction of WALL-E is a mirror for us and where we've landed in 2023. Not only have we grown an insatiable need to consume cheap food and products and content, but much of what we consume is engineered to addict us and have us craving more. We might not yet be blobs floating in outer space, but there are billionaires building rockets to take us to space to escape our planet's impending climate catastrophe. And many of us do stare at screens all day, working and playing and reading and doom scrolling, consuming without end. In 1986, researchers at USC and the Open University of Catalonia found that if you added up all the information being blasted at the average human being through TV, radio, and reading, it amounted to 85-page newspapers worth of information every day. In 1986. By the time the iPhone debuted in 2007, they found it had risen to the equivalent of 174 newspapers per day. Assuredly, that number has gone up significantly in the last 16 years, since the average person now touches, clicks, and swipes through their phone 2,600 times a day. As Johann Hari writes in his phenomenal book, Stolen Focus, we told ourselves we could have a massive expansion in the amount of information we are exposed to and the speed at which it hits us with no costs. This is a delusion. In an interview with Soon Layman, the professor explains what we are sacrificing is depths in all sorts of dimensions. Depth takes time, and depth takes reflection. If you have to keep up with everything and send emails all the time, there's no time to reach depth. It's pulling us more and more up to the surface. But it's not just depth that we sacrifice, it's our actual smarts. Hewlett-Packard commissioned a study to understand the effects of distraction on their workers. They first tested their IQ undistracted, and then again when they were distracted by just a phone call or email. Johann Hari reports that this study found that technological distraction, just getting emails and calls, caused a drop in the worker's IQ by an average of 10 points. To give you a sense of how much 10 IQ points is, it's the equivalent of not having slept the night before and taking a test. We've come to think of our world as inseparable from our devices. Just think about the feeling you get, I certainly do, when your phone battery is dead or you accidentally leave it somewhere. You're completely cut off from everyone and everything. But as author Douglas Rushkoff writes in his latest book, Team Human, our most advanced technologies are not actually enhancing our connectivity, but thwarting it. They're replacing and devaluing our humanity, and in many different ways, undermining our respect for one another and ourselves. And sadly, this has been by design. Judaism offers many approaches to the problems faced by the onslaught of information and attack on our attention. Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, a wonderful Northern California rabbi and author, writes that the story of Moses at the burning bush is actually a tale of attention. The story, he writes, is customarily offered as a miracle that God performed to get Moses' attention. But look more closely at the process of combustion. How long would you have to watch wood burn before you would know whether or not it was actually being consumed? Even dry kindling wood is not burned up for several minutes. This then would mean that Moses would have had to watch the amazing sight closely for several minutes before he could possibly know there was even a miracle to watch. The burning bush was not a miracle. It was a test. God wanted to find out if Moses was capable of paying attention to something for more than a few minutes. There is another world, Rabbi Kushner writes, hidden right here within this one, whenever we pay attention. As I read Stolen Focus, which you should urgently read, I couldn't recommend it more, I realized I was living life through a blurry lens of distraction. I let my phone addiction stand between me and the thing I built my life around, connection, and most importantly, connection with my kids. Right in front of me was my world, everything I cared about, but I couldn't see it because I had a little digital vortex in my hand. Rabbi Kushner drives home this inability to see the inability to see the world in front of us, to see beyond our screens, with the story of Jacob's ladder from Genesis. After Jacob's majestic dream of angels climbing up and down the ladder, he wakes and says, "Wow, God was in this place, and I did not know." Rabbi Kushner notes that Rashi, our great medieval commentator, who focused on the literal words of the Torah, what they actually meant, that Rashi teaches us to do again what we haven't done since we were small children, to pay close attention to the obvious. What Jacob means when he says God is in this place and he did not know is so obvious it's almost comical. If he had known that God would have been there, he wouldn't have gone to sleep in such a holy place. How many of us need such a simple reminder? If I had known my phone would interrupt family dinners and worsen my work-life balance, if I had known the dopamine hits of instant gratification from likes and 2-day shipping would undermine my discipline, if I had known Facebook was intentionally addicting me and spreading lies for profit, if I had known Google had researchers finding ways to make me spend more hours in email, if I had known my daily screen time would far eclipse my daily time being present with my beautiful, fast-growing kids, if I had known that online shopping would condition me to need more and more and more and clutter my home with unnecessary things, if I had known that the digital age would make community and genuine human connection feel increasingly elusive, if we had known, maybe we would have acted differently. But we do know. One of the powerful parts of Jacob's dream is he woke up with perspective. He woke up with understanding. He woke up with intention. The Hebrew word for intention is kavanah. In our tradition, it's generally understood as focused, intentional thinking for the purpose of prayer. The 12th century Egyptian sage Maimonides explained that prayer cannot be said unless the davener, the person praying, has the proper intention. In fact, if you say prayer without the proper intention, you have to say it again. You have to repeat it. Maimonides gives some examples of distractions that keep us from this proper intention. Anyone who is confused, anyone who comes in from a journey, anyone who is tired, anyone who is irritated. It sounds like me coming home after a long day. And I'm sure we could list many more examples that keep us from being present. But ultimately, the idea of kavanah, of having intention, can be expanded to help us find balance in a digital world that is not slowing down. When you have family time, what rules do you have in place for your phone? When you're sitting at the dinner table or after you get in bed, how often do you check your phone? When you're watching TV, are you watching TV or are you looking at your phone with the TV on in the background? When you have free time, are you enriching your life and practicing self-care or staring at screens and doom scrolling? At the beginning of the prophetic text of Haggai, he preaches to those who have returned to Jerusalem in the 6th century BCE after the temple was destroyed, but continue to live amidst the ruin, failing to begin building their next chapter. He tells them, Simu levavchem al darchechem. Consider how you've been faring. Pay attention to your ways, or more literally, put your heart, your lev, on your path, on your derech. He tells them, you've sowed much, but brought in little. You eat without being satisfied. You drink without getting your fill. You clothe yourselves, but no one gets warm. And he who earns it for a leaky purse. That last one really hits home. It feels like Haggai would have been a great prophet aboard the Axiom ship in Wall-E, pleading with these human blobs to pay attention, to simu lev, to look at each other instead of their screens, to recognize that the blessing of life is connection. In a scene that really struck me on this recent rewatch, Two people who cross paths with Wally and consequently end up without screens in front of them because he breaks them, they touch hands. And the reaction in the film would have you believe that this was the first human contact for centuries. But Haggai would also be criticizing us. Again, the metaphor from Wally might seem extreme, but our increase in screen time has correlated to higher rates of loneliness and disconnection. Yes, we know what our high school friends are doing all over the country, or we know what those friends want us to know that they're doing, but we're talking less to the people next to us. We're engaging less in community. We're staring at screens instead of faces. When was the last time you noticed two strangers in public, on a train, at a coffee shop, at a park, actually interacting? When was the last time you interacted with a stranger in a meaningful way? Our technology today is not going backwards. We cannot return to a world without technology as much as some of us would like to. Author Brad Stulberg, who just published a book on accepting change, explains that most humans prefer homeostasis. That means that when we experience a change, we prefer to return to the same state we knew before the change happened, from X to Y back to X. But there's another model of change called allostasis. In allostasis, Stulberg writes, healthy systems also crave stability. We all do. But the baseline of that stability can be somewhere new. X to Y to Z. So how can we learn to accept the changes of technology in a healthy way and deal with our new reality? One of Judaism's oldest technologies to keep us focused on what matters is ritual. Professor Dan Ariely teaches that there's an interesting distinction between habits and rituals. Habits are usually things we don't think about. We do them in a routinized way. We don't spend effort. We don't pay attention. They're not in our consciousness to the same degree. But rituals are different. Rituals are ways to direct more attention rather than less attention. Think about the ritual of drinking fancy wine. You take a glass, you swirl it, you look at it, you sip it, you smell it. It takes much more attention. If you sat next to your laptop and you drank a very nice bottle of wine from a very nice glass, but you didn't pay attention to it, you wouldn't get the same value and joy and meaning out of it. There are some things you don't want to do as habits, like parent. You want to do them as rituals because you want people to pay attention. Our phone use is a habit. We can't get in line at a grocery store or get through a meal or even go to the bathroom without checking our phones. You probably don't want to know how many times you pick up your phone a day, although your phone will tell you if you look for it. Mine is over 200. I looked it up this week, in the middle of the high holidays, still that high. I know, geez. Mostly because I think we've lost our ability to be bored, to be idle, to just sit in our thoughts for a moment. But ritual allows us time and space to be idle, to focus on what matters, to reset and recharge. And while Judaism offers many built-in rituals like Shabbat, it also offers a starting point for creativity, to create set-apart, sanctified, holy time for what matters to you. Maybe you don't want to turn your phone off for 25 hours every Shabbat, but you could turn your phone off every Friday evening and have a glass of wine with your partner. Maybe Saturday morning your family goes for a walk and you leave all your devices behind. Maybe Jewish holidays become a time for long, disconnected meals to just focus on what's right in front of us. Or maybe you create rituals that aren't connected to our heritage, things that your family just loves to do. My family loves national parks. This year we visited Yosemite and Joshua Tree and Sequoia. Being disconnected amongst the giant sequoias this summer were some of the most restorative and spiritual moments of my year. Whatever helps bring you balance and leads you away from screens, turn them into rituals and don't let them lapse. Our task during the high holidays is to heed the call of Haggai and pay attention to our ways, to put our hearts on our paths, to ask ourselves honestly, how have we been faring in the digital age, in the age of information, in the age of smartphones, in the dawn of artificial intelligence? Do we have a healthy relationship with technology, with social media? Take a look at your screen time. Are you proud of it? And I know you're with me this evening. I know you're paying attention. This is the best sermon you've ever heard. But how many times have you checked your phone during the sermon? The answer in this room is definitely not 0. Just saying. If you're anything like me, we have a lot of work to do. But know there is another world, a world of connection and beauty, a world of savoring moments and milestones, a hidden world right here within this one, whenever we pay attention, whenever we put our phones down and live in the moment, to a year of being present, a year of observing meaningful rituals, a year of quality time with the people that matter most. Gamar Chatima Tova. It is now my great pleasure to invite our past president, Natalie Rothenberg, up for some words.